Hi everybody, and welcome back to Zoetopia and Philosophy Chat. Today's episode is the first episode in a three-part series where we will be looking at the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle and comparing the two. Aristotle was a student of Plato, and so there is a lot of good ground for comparison, as a lot of his philosophy is a response to Plato's, and they answer a lot of the same questions, only differently. So today we will be looking at their worldview. And their worldviews are very different, but there are also a lot of similarities, which we will be taking a close look at. But first, who were these men? Well, Plato was a man born into an aristocratic family in 427 before our time. He was originally planning to go into politics as his stand in society suggested, but because of the chaotic state of society, and that the sitting government were the ones who had sentenced Socrates to his death, which, as we know, Socrates was super important to Plato. He decided to not do that, and instead he wrote political philosophy. And we will be looking at that political philosophy in the next episode. First now, I will be looking at my notes. So, I was supposed to say that since the sitting government gave Socrates the death penalty in 399 before our time, Plato wasn't really digging the whole political career thing anymore. So his focus shifted from the politics of his time and their society to, like I said, political philosophy, and he created an ideal state or ideal society that would be relevant for any human civilization at any time, like the law of nature. And he also took it upon himself to continue Socrates' project of theoretically proving the sophist relativism wrong. As he saw this as part of the political downfall in Athens. It's like so hard to remember your notes when it's 1 a.m. Moving on, in 388, Plato founded his famous school, the Academy, which was open for over 900 years. Plato does his writing in dialogues, which can often make it hard to understand what he's really saying, because he's usually not in the dialogues himself, and they don't include any concluding statements. It also really doesn't help that he seems to have changed his mind over the course of his philosophical career, which is why we tend to divide his writings into three periods. The early Socratic dialogues in the between period, were the status, which has a lot of the things we will be looking at today, and the late dialogues, were the laws, which we will be looking at in the next episode. Now, Aristotle was born in 384 before our time in Stagira on the coast of Macedonia. His father was a doctor, which might have been part of the reason why he was so interested in biology. When he was 17 years old, he went to Athens to study at the Academy, where he stayed for 20 years until Plato's death in 347. Now, Aristotle is more about this world and the society than Plato. While Plato looks at the ideas behind the world and the ideal society, Aristotle looks at the forms and matter of the world and the different forms of ruling that we have in the society that is realistic. After Plato's death, Aristotle went on a lot of study travels. He studied a lot of nature scientific stuff like biology. He looked at different species, especially natal species. And then he tutored Alexander the Great for several years. When Alexander became king, Aristotle went to Athens and founded his own school, Lycaon. But after Alexander's death, a lot of people in Athens, or the people of Athens really, turned against him because of his Macedonian past. And he had to flee. And he did this at the age of 62, and he died the year after. Aristotle has left a lot of writings, but he was the type of philosopher who was always searching. So his writings aren't really meant as conclusions at all. They're just meant as his thoughts, and then we can sort of like continue our search, or continue his search with his thoughts. Now, with that in mind, let's take a look at Plato and Aristotle's view of the world and ask ourselves, is this world true? First of all, what is everything? The teachings of what is called ontology. And Plato's ontology tells us that there are two sides to everything, or it's dualistic. So we have our world, which is imperfect. And then we have the world of ideas, which is perfect and which holds the forms of everything which is. So in our world, we have circles, we have love, we have democracy, we have horses, but none of these are real because they're just flawed copies of the idea world. In the idea world, you can find an actually round circle. You can find the actual pure form of love. So when we see any of those things in our world, when we learn something, we're actually not learning, we're remembering. Because he believes that we were first spirits in the idea world, and there we knew everything. Then we come to this world and we're trapped in our bodies, and we have to sort of try to get closer to the ideas. True knowledge is the one of ideas. So when you see a circle, it actually just reminds you of that perfect circle in the idea world. So you're not learning, you're remembering. And when we die, we are freed from our bodies, come back to the ideal world, and know everything. So Plato has a dualistic view of everything. The world is matter and ideas. And humans are body and soul. And because our soul is trapped in our bodies, we can never really get true knowledge. But we can get truer knowledge. And the whole point of life for him is to get closer and closer to the ideas. Because since the ideas is the only thing that is true, because our world isn't true, because it's just a bad copy, only knowledge of the ideas is what is true knowledge, which is this epistemological philosophy. But the goal isn't just for each individual to get closer to the ideas. It's also for the society as a whole to get close to ideas, that we can push our society closer to the ideal. And if you remember the Pythagoreans' worldview that we talked about a couple episodes ago, they believe that the unchangeable and all the changes and what is underlying in society in the world is math. That's actually really close to Plato's view of the world, because he believes that the underlying true and unchanging thing are the ideas, and these ideas actually include math, because math is one of those things that is always sort of lying there, just waiting to be discovered or rediscovered, whether it's actually in use or not. Therefore, it is actually truer than what we can see and touch. Now over to Aristotle's worldview, which is pretty different, so let's put on our nature scientific hats. Hopefully I have one. So Aristotle speaks of substances which are things, like for example a book, and attributes, which are for example colors or height. And this is very similar to Plato's divide of idea and form. But to Aristotle's, a substance is independent. It exists even if the attributes don't exist. Well, the attributes exist within the substance. So, for example, he means that if there is no pink in this world that can be seen, then there is no pink. Well, for Plato, it would be the complete opposite, as he believes that the ideas, which are sort of like the attributes, but not really, because it's like Aristotle puts the ideas in the object. But Plato would say, pink exists anyways, dude. But all of the substances can't exist independently. We also have them in groups. Otherwise, there would be chaos. Like, imagine if you're rounding up all the pigs and you can't say, round up the pigs. You have to be like, round up Mary and Sheldon and what do people call their pigs? I don't know. I don't have a pig. The point is, to do this, we need the attributes. So Aristotle teaches us that groupings are done by looking at the relevant attributes of a group. For instance, when you look at horses, the relevant attribute would be they have 4 legs, they're roughly this size, blah, blah. Not if they're brown or yellow, because horses can be different colors. So their color becomes irrelevant in this case. As mentioned before, Aristotle's Ontology and other parts of his philosophical teachings is one that focuses more on this world than anything, which is completely opposite to Plato. However, he was Plato's student, so he actually does have a pretty similar divide as he does, but they have very different views on which part is the truest. But let's take a look at what the philosophers have in common in their ontology. Both separate the items and the attributes, whether we call them idea and form or substance and attributes. Both also view one as more important than the other. And they both have a dualistic and hierarchic system in this worldview, though Plato more so than Aristotle's. Both also recognize the importance of not only naming the individual substance or matter, but also the attributes these has as to group them to avoid chaos and achieve cosmos. Cosmos, what is it in English? I don't know. I looked it up, guys. It's cosmos. We can all sleep tonight now. So, their view of what cosmos is also different. Plato views cosmos as coming as close to the ideals as possible, while Aristotle views cosmos as a universe where everything is where it should be. And for everything to be in its place, we must know what everything is, and that includes the humans. Now, as a bonus, let's take a look at their views of something I believe is maybe the truest of all, art. Now, Plato isn't just a philosopher, he's an artist. His writings are beautiful, poetic, thought-provoking, and hilarious all at once. And we'll definitely do an episode in this masterpiece symposium later because it's amazing. But for now, let's just say that no one could possibly have such a complete understanding of love and the ability to both proclaim it and explain it at once without having the soul of an artist. Which is why it might come as a shock that in his political philosophy, he actually has a very skeptic view on art and the artist and wants heavy censorship in his ideal society, which we will look at in the next episode. But it actually makes sense. You see, the force that holds everything up in the idea world, that both created it and nurtures it, is called the good, or the true, or the beautiful. In fact, it doesn't even matter because it's so beyond that our mind can't comprehend it and we can't put any words on it. But it's perfection, it's order, it's cosmos. And since artists are in the business of beauty, they are also in the business of truth, which means that in one way they are a great source to the idea world because they can actually take their inspiration from the ideas. But this also means that if someone were to create a portrait which is not inspired by the idea world, then in a way it's immortal. It is not immortal, it's immoral. Not to mention that often art is sort of like a copy of the world, like realistic portraits are, for instance, a portrait of the ocean or a deer. And here, the art would be a copy of a copy, since that deer or that ocean is already a copy. And for Plato, that isn't very high because it's just one step closer. It's one step further from the truth. Now, in Aristotle's view, art has a higher status and two functions: imitation and catharsis. With imitation, the goal is aesthetics, and aesthetics is sort of like taken in by the senses, not the mind. And in Aristotle's this world-minded philosophy, the senses have a very high place. And so he believes that imitations is really important because we get to see and experience the world in a different way, and we get to see different sides of it. And to him, experiencing the world directly through our senses is incredibly important for humans and our development. The other use for art is catharsis. Now, with imitation, we show the world more or less as it is. And with catharsis, we show the world as it could be. And this is where the ethics comes in. Because Aristotle believes that the most important part of leading a good life and having a good society is balance. So in art, we get to live out the extremes. We can have drama, intrigues, horrible characters, extremely kind characters, all of the extremes, so that we don't have to live them in our own life. And so we don't have to jeopardize our possibilities to live a good life, and we don't have to jeopardize society. Plus, this meeting with real-life possibilities in art can stop us from making the same mistakes or having the same traits in real life, thus cleansing society before the problem even arrives. Hashtag cathartic much? So, turning our attention back from art to the main question of today. Is our world true? Or maybe a fairer question in this context to ask would be, what is the truest? Or at least, what is true? If a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, did it fall? Most people would to this respond, yes. But ask the same person, if the color pink were to disappear from this world and no one had any recollection of it, is there any pink? The person might answer, no, there is no pink. But what if something pink was to appear all of a sudden? Is pink now but not before because it is on Earth? To me, pink was lying there all along as a potentiality and became an actuality. I believe that nothing I can lay my eyes on, including myself, can really be proven to be true. As far as I know, I could be in a simulator somewhere or in a dream, or I could even be a computer according to many geeky movies and shows. But I do know that circles, squares, colors, scents, and feelings exist, at least as ideas. Someone, somewhere, under some name, or I don't even know if it's a someone, but something, thought of these things, because I can't see something that doesn't even exist as an idea. Even if humans aren't real, the idea of a human is real. And this book, maybe this book isn't real, but it's squared, and someone or something thought of a square. I don't know if it's called a square. I don't know if I don't know where words come from. Maybe everything's a lie, but I do know that this at least exists as an idea. But those are just my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Comment below. Until next time, bye.